Good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us today. Our seminar this afternoon is an introduction to data on ethnicity. Now today this is a joint webinar, so it's going to be presented by myself. I'm Deborah and I'm from the UK Data Service, and I have Alita Nandi as my co-presenter from the Institute for Social and Economic Research. So this afternoon we're going to be having a look at ethnicity as a topic in social surveys, and we're going to have a look at how you can find really good sources of data on ethnicity. We're then going to switch to focusing on a specific survey as our demonstration, and that's Understanding Society, which is a really excellent source of data on many topics, but particularly on ethnicity. Once we've introduced you to the survey itself, we're going to have a look at some of the useful resources and documents that accompany the survey. And then very quickly, we're just going to have a look at how you can access the data. Okay, so ethnicity is a term that we use to describe a collective identity. And it's based on the assumption that a collectivity has its roots in a common ancestry, heritage, religion, culture, nationality, language, and a territory. Ethnicity constitutes a really important element of the social world, and for many it's a central element of their personal and social identity, and it shapes their relationships, and so it's a really key area of interest in social research. Data on ethnicity is collected in many large UK and government surveys, and it can include information on aspects such as ethnic identity, country of birth, and parents' country of birth, nationality and religion. The 2011 census showed that 11.2% of people in England and Wales are from ethnic minority groups. So social survey information on ethnicity is really vital, both at local and national levels, in building a picture of the ethnic minority populations and the relationships they have to the ethnic majority population over time. And this ensures that effective policies can be developed to address issues such as inequalities. Now, just in case any of you are not really familiar, the UK Data Service is a single point of access to a wide range of secondary social science data. Now, many surveys collect data on ethnicity, but the information collected can vary. So the first task in beginning to research ethnicity is to search for a really good source of data. And that's where we at the UK Data Service can help. Our website can enable you to search quickly and easily for a range of data. And you can also find a range of support, training and guidance resources, such as our video tutorials. And you can have a look later on using the link you see at the bottom of your screen. Now, when you log on to our website, this is the home page that you'll see. From here, you can navigate your way around the website. There are a number of different ways to search for data on ethnicity on our website. You can do so using the Discover Search tool, or have a look at the data types links down on the bottom left-hand side. You can also use our data by theme pages, and we're going to have a look at those now. In order to get to the Data by Theme page, you simply click on Get Data and then Data by Theme on the left-hand side. And we're going to have a quick look using a live demonstration now. So when you click on the Data by Theme page, this is what you'll see. As you scroll down the page, you can see that there are a number of different themes, ranging from housing, the local environment, the labour market, all the way up to education and ageing. We add new themes fairly regularly, and we're currently working on a poverty and social exclusion theme. So if that's something you're interested in, then keep an eye out for that. Today we're looking at ethnicity, so we'll scroll down, find the section on ethnicity and just click on the title. This will take you onto the ethnicity data by theme page. And you can see that there are 4 tabs across the top here. Let's have a quick look at each one. Now we're going to start with the Discover tab. Now here you can find links to different ways of searching for ethnicity data. So here again is the Discover search tool, and here you can have a look at some existing studies. You can also find links to our thesaurus facility and the variable and question bank. On the Research tab, you can find some existing studies which have used data that we hold to research aspects of ethnicity. It can be really useful to have a look at these just to see how people have used the data and to see what research has already been done. The Resources tab will allow you to access some of the other resources we have. So from here you can have a look at some of the guides and teaching data sets that we hold. And you can also see that we have a number of different links for external websites, which again are really valuable sources of information on ethnicity. But we're going to go back to the first tab now, which is the key data. Now here you can see a list of different data sets, all of which contain information on ethnicity. Now this is by no means an exhaustive list, it's just some of the key ones, and it's a really good place to get started in your search for good data. Now this afternoon we're going to concentrate on just the one survey, and that's Understanding Society. Now Understanding Society is the largest longitudinal household survey in the UK, and it's one of the largest in the world. And it's a really fantastic data source for ethnicity research. It's run and managed by the Institute for Social and Economic Research. So now I'm going to hand over to Alita Nandi from the Understanding Society team, who's going to introduce you to some of the key aspects of the survey.
Thank you, Deborah. Okay, so today I will give a brief overview of the survey and then focus on the data relevant for ethnicity-related research. I will also talk about how to access information and help about the survey from the Understanding Society website. So the survey started in 2009-2010 with a sample of around 30,000 households living in the UK. Now the technical name of the study is the UK Longitudinal Household Study. As the name suggests, this sample is representative of the UK. This survey has a household focus. So when I say household focus, what I mean is that the information is collected from the entire household, who provide the contextual information for individual level analysis. For example, you might want to know whether living in a single earner household increases the risk of being poor. It is also a longitudinal survey, and by this I mean the same set of individuals are interviewed repeatedly. This allows us to see how their lives change over time. For example, we can see if some people are persistently poor, we can find out what causes people to move out of unemployment, etc. But what happens when individuals move? For example, because they have broken up with their partner, or because they have moved in with a new partner, or because they have found a new job in a different city. Well, we follow them as long as they are still living in the UK, including if they have moved into institutions, but there are some exceptions. So we don't follow them into prisons or places where we cannot get access to. We also don't follow some individuals, and let me show that with an example. In wave 1, we sampled a household with a mother, father and a daughter. Think of them as being part of our main sample. These are the people whose lives we want to understand. So they are called the original sample members. In the next wave, the daughter moves out of her parents' household and moves into a new household with her partner. Now the parents and the daughter will still be interviewed as they are original sample members, and we want to know about their lives. Now as the daughter has moved in with a partner, we also want to know about the partner, as he now constitutes her household. Now remember, we have a household focus, so he will also be interviewed. In the following wave, the daughter and her partner break up and they are no longer living together. Now the parents and daughter who are still living in separate households are still interviewed as they are our original sample members. But as the daughter's ex-partner is neither in our original sample nor is he part of an OSM household, he will not be interviewed anymore. One other thing, all children born to OSM mothers also become OSM, so we will also follow them. The next question is, who provides all this different information? First, any adult who answers the door is asked about who lives in the household, their names, and some basic information such as age, sex, marital status, etc. This is noted down in the household and enumeration grid. Once we know who lives in the household, we find out who knows about the household. So generally, this is the person who owns or rents the dwelling, or older of the two if jointly owned. This person then answers questions from the household questionnaire. That includes questions such as household expenditure, consumer durables that the household owns, how many bedrooms there are in the household. Next, the interviewer also attempts to interview all adults in the household, and they are asked questions from the adult questionnaires. Now this is where bulk of the information comes from. By the way, we consider anyone 16 years or older as an adult for interview purposes. These people are asked questions by the interviewers, but they're also asked to fill in a short questionnaire by themselves. These are generally sensitive questions that you may not be comfortable discussing with a stranger. This is the self-completion questionnaire. Now, in a few cases, someone may nominate their spouse or adult children to answer questions on their behalf because they're ill or very busy. Such interviews are known as proxy interviews. These proxy questionnaires are shorter than the adult questionnaire as they only include factual information or factual questions that you would expect a close family member to know. So these do not include subjective evaluations and subjective questions such as those on attitudes and feelings. Next, all 10 to 15-year-olds are asked a few questions about their lives. This is the youth questionnaire. This includes questions like frequency of computer use, whether they were bullied by siblings or at school, how happy they are with their school, their parents, etc. Note, some information is also collected about children younger than this age group, but that is reported by their parents and guardians in the adult questionnaire, so they are themselves not asked. Now, why is this study such a valuable resource for ethnicity-related research? There are a number of reasons. First, it is the only longitudinal survey for ethnicity-related research in the UK. Second, it is a multidisciplinary, multi-topic survey with ethnicity as one of its priority areas. Finally, it also includes ethnic minority boost sample to increase the sample sizes of different ethnic minority groups in the UK. This allows us to analyze different ethnic groups separately. And in wave 6, a new immigrant and ethnic minority boost sample will be added. So watch this space for that one. Finally, an extra 5 minutes of question time is set aside for questions relevant for ethnicity and migration research, such as questions on harassment, remittances, etc. Now, what are these different topics that are covered by the study? So along with ethnicity-related questions, you also have questions on education, employment, family and the household, health behaviors and well-being, income, housing, wealth, expenditure and deprivation, and many other questions like on attitudes and feelings. Now the idea is this will allow you to answer a wide array of research questions, and we'll see a few examples in a little while. So as I said, ethnicity is one of the priority areas of this study, so there are many questions on ethnicity. First, it covers a large number of measures of ethnicity. So you have the standard census ethnic group question, but then you also have questions on country of birth and year of arrival to the UK, parents and grandparents' countries of birth, religion and childhood language. What this means is that you can construct groups relevant for your analysis using these questions. Second, it also includes many questions that are relevant for ethnicity-related research, such as questions on remittances, ethnic identity, Britishness, social and friendship networks, etc. Now, what proportion of people living in the UK in 2009 and 10, when Understanding Society started, were born outside of the UK? On your screen, you will see the question and 3 possible answers. So click on the one that you think is the correct one. Okay, so about 82% of you have, 90% have already voted, and the majority of you have chosen the answer 12.2%, which is the correct answer. And so here are a few examples of ethnicity-related research that people have already worked on or are currently working on. So are migrants more likely to be overqualified? If so, are migrants more specific? If so, are migrants from specific countries more vulnerable? Are income, poverty, persistence, material deprivation different across ethnic groups? What explains this difference? Does social network and English language ability matter? Or is there an ethnic wage penalty? Does that decrease across generations? Is it a consequence of some ethnic minorities being concentrated in low-paying jobs? Questions like this. Now, before you start delving into the data and analyzing it, there are a few things about the survey design that you should keep in mind. First, the study includes a main nationally representative sample, which we refer to as the general population sample or the GPS. This consists of around 26,000 households as of wave 1. As we said before, to analyze ethnic groups separately, the study also includes an ethnic minority boost sample. Now, how was the sample selected? We randomly selected 43,000 addresses in areas of high ethnic minority concentration. And then at the doorstep, we asked whoever answered the door a screening question to find out if there was an ethnic minority household. We found 4,000 such households who became part of the ethnic minority boost sample. But remember, for research, both samples need to be analyzed together for complete coverage of ethnic groups. So I'm guessing now you want to know something about the sample sizes of the different ethnic groups. So here it is. This table shows the total number of adult interviews by ethnic groups. Look at the total column right in the extreme right-hand side of your screen. It is the most relevant numbers. Now, our target was to have at least 1,000 adult interviews from the 5 largest ethnic minority groups and as many possible from the other groups. Now, those groups are Black African, Black Caribbean, Bangladeshi, Pakistani, and Indian groups, and you can see we've achieved the target. And we also have sufficient sample sizes from the other ethnic minority groups, such as any other white background, Chinese mix, and so on. Now, as I said earlier, 5 minutes of question time was set aside for ethnicity-related questions. So who were these questions asked of? First, these were asked of all those in the ethnic minority boost sample. But remember, this sample was drawn from only high ethnic minority concentration areas. Now, it is known that in many respects, these individuals are different from those ethnic minorities living in areas with fewer ethnic minorities. For example, they may have smaller social network. So we wanted to include them as well. So these questions were also asked of all ethnic minorities in the general population survey living in low ethnic minority concentration areas. Finally, we would also like to compare the outcomes with the white majority group. So these questions were also asked of a random subsample of 500 households from the GPS. So by the way, the extra 5 minutes subsample are also asked all the questions that the rest of the survey sample gets asked. It's just that they're asked these extra questions as well. So here are a few examples of the questions included in the extra 5 minutes sample. But for more comprehensive list and further details, you can refer to the ethnicity user guide and the long-term content plan, and we will talk about this a bit later. It's time for our last poll. This time the question is, what percentage of UK residents in 2009 or 10 sent or gave money to anyone in a country outside of the UK in the past 12 months? And you have the 3 possible answers on your screen. So it seems 47% of you have chosen the answer 22.3%, 33% have chosen 5.8%, and few have chosen the third answer. Well, the correct answer is 5.8%. Getting back to the survey has lots more to offer. First, we provide geographical locator variables of where the sample members live. So you can then use these to match to different geographical data such as the census. There are additional restrictions for getting access to finer levels of geography, and Deborah will talk more about this later. We also provide school codes, which you can then use to match school level information. A lot of it is also freely available. Finally, we have also linked our survey data for England to the National Pupil Database for England, but only for those who gave us consent to do so. Due to the large sample size spread across the UK, you can do regional level analysis, as well as analysis of minority populations such as just single parents or people with disability. This is also a rich source of data for health and biomarkers. These were collected by nurses from a subsample after waves 2 and 3 for different subsamples. And you can analyze the socioeconomic correlates of individuals' health markers such as grip strength, lung function test, blood pressure, and lots more. Now, some of you may already know about the BHPS, which was a similar longitudinal household survey that started in 1991. Now, individuals were interviewed every year until 2008. This sample has become part of Understanding Society since its second wave, that is since 2010. You can use this subsample to analyze long-term changes in people's lives, that is since 1991. Now I'll talk a little bit about the data structure, which will be useful both for analysis and for looking through the online documentation. Now, as the data is collected at different levels, such as households and individuals, and this is repeated every year, it is not efficient to provide the data as one large flat file. So what we do is that we provide the data as a series of separate files. We also provide the variables that you will need to link these files together. Now, each type of data based on a particular source is available as a separate file. For each wave, there is one such set of files. But then there are so many files. To make it manageable, we follow an easy naming convention. So the same type of data file will always have the same root name. A letter wave prefix allows you to identify the wave. So A underscore for wave 1, B underscore for wave 2, and so on. And the same naming convention applies to variables as well. So here is an example of the list of wave 1 files. As you can see, all the names start with A underscore. So for example, there's a file called A underscore in resp. Now if you look at the list of files for wave 2, you see now this file is called B underscore in resp. So this is the same for variables. Now note that not all questions are asked of everybody, as it will be pointless, for example, to ask someone about the job if they are not employed. Now this is an example of a valid skip. There's a valid reason for this question being missing. But even when a question is asked, the person may choose not to answer or may not know the answer. So there are holes in the data. These missing values are assigned a negative value code, and each code will tell you why the data is missing. In some cases, of course, we impute the missing data, such as for income. Then there are no holes. But then we also provide a flag variable which tells you whether the variable has been imputed or not. We also provide some derived variables to make it easier for users, such as summary scores, family identifiers, and in some cases when the data has been checked for consistency. Most of these derived variables will have a suffix. So at the end you'll see an underscore dv. And these variables are generally placed towards the end of the data files. Now let me talk a little bit about weights and sample design. So as you know, not all ethnic groups were selected with the same probability. And so estimates based on the sample will reflect these groups more than others. Also, not everyone selected gave an interview, so there is non-response and attrition. Now, if those who are in our sample are different from those not included in terms of some variable of interest, then estimates based on the sample may give us biased population estimates. For example, suppose we want to know the average pay in the UK, but we know that some ethnic groups on an average have lower wages. Now, as their proportion in our sample is more than in the population due to the boost sample, estimates of average wage based on our sample will be lower than in the population. So we provide weights, and once you use the weights, the idea is it will counterbalance this effect, and you will get unbiased estimates of the population. To know more about the weights, take a look at the user guide. There's a separate section. One other thing, as is common with most large-scale surveys, Understanding Society sample has a clustered and stratified sample design rather than a simple random sample. Because of that, you will need to estimate the standard errors that take into account this sample design. But actually, this is quite simple with most statistical softwares. It's very easy to let them know how to do it. And the variables representing the clusters and the strata are provided. And here is an example of what happens if you do not use weights. So on the left-hand side, you see that the average estimated monthly wages in the UK is £809 per month. But once you use the weights, this average estimate, the estimate of the average wage increases to £1,875 per month. And that was the point that I was trying to make. Now I will hand it over to Deborah.
Excellent, thank you, Alita. Okay, so now you've had a chance to see what an excellent source of data Understanding Society is, we're just going to quickly have a look at how you access that. You may already have access data through us, so we're not going to spend too much time on this. There are online guides. If you're not familiar with downloading data, there are some guides on our website to help you through this. The way that we're going to access the data today is through the data by theme page, which we had a look at earlier. So let's go back to the website now. Okay, so you remember from earlier, we were on the data by theme page and we were having a look at the key data tab. Now, we want to have a look at Understanding Society. It's arranged alphabetically, so that's right down the bottom. And in order to get to the series record, you just click on the link. Now, you'll notice here where it says data access, there are 3 different records. Now, these apply to the different level of access conditions. So we've got the secure access, special license, and the end user license. The different set of access conditions depend on the level of data and the sensitivity of the data. So, for example, the end user license, you may well already be aware, that's the data that you can access and download straight away to your PC. The special license version contains a little bit more detailed data. So for example, you might want month and year of birth rather than just age. Now here you can download the data, but you will need to complete an application form first, which is sent to the data owners. So be aware that that will take a little bit longer. The secure access is just available to those in higher education, so either a student or a researcher. Now here you'll get a lot more detail and a lot more sensitive data, so you could, for example, get full date of birth, or you could get smaller geographical areas such as postcodes. Now, because of the level of sensitivity, the access conditions are obviously tighter, so you will need to go on a training course for this one. So please, if you want to have a look at that particular one, do make sure that it's data that you need before you go through that process. Today we're just going to have a look at the end user license version. So all you need to do is just to click on this plus symbol here. Now there are 3 different data sets available, and we're going to focus on the main data, and all you need to do is just click on the title and it will take you to the data catalogue record. This is actually a really useful page before you think about downloading the data. Have a read through, because you can see here there's a lot of really important information. So as we scroll down the page, you can have a look at the abstract, which will give you a really good outline of the data. It will have a look at some of the different topics and some of the different standardized measures that are used. You can also find information on the spatial units that you can access. So here we can see you can look at government office regions. It will also tell you about method of collection and the sample size. Now, as we head down to the bottom, you can see this very long list of documentation. And there are 5 waves of Understand Society data available now. And there are a number of documents for each wave. We're going to have a look at some of the key documents now. Obviously there's a lot of them, so we won't look at them all, but we'll have a look at just some of the key ones. So one of the most useful ones, this is one of the most important documents to read before you get started with any analysis, and this is the user guide. Now you can see I've included the content list on the left-hand side of your screen, so you can see the sort of things that are in the user guide. So there's details about the sample design, the different survey instruments, some of the information that Alita mentioned with the 5-minute extra questions, all sorts of derived variables, information about weighting. So it's really important just to have a good look through that before you get started. The other important document is the technical report, and you'll find one for each wave, and this will enable you to have a look at the moving and tracing procedures, how split-off households are dealt with, and it will also talk about translations for non-English speakers, and there's information about the different questionnaires and response rates. So you might find some of those topics quite interesting. One of the other really valuable pieces of documentation are the questionnaires, and again they're available for every wave and every type of questionnaire for Understand Society. These can be a really valuable source of information. This is the contents page for the Wave 3 adult questionnaire, and you can see that the questions are organised into modules, and each module relates to a different topic. Now, to navigate your way quickly through the questionnaire, you just simply click on the module name that you're interested in. It can be really useful to have a look through, as you can find out quite a lot of information about how the questions were asked and also who were asked each question. Now, there is quite a lot of information on the questionnaires, and it can be a little bit confusing at first glance. So we're going to have a very quick look at 2 example questions. So this first one is a question called Nat ID. So from the top of the page you can see the question name, which is the variable name as it will appear in the data. It's followed by a label, so that tells us that the question is about national identity. You can see a little bit further down where it says text. and this will show you the exact question wording as it was used by the interviewers. There's some instructions here for the interviewers. So here we can see that respondents were able to choose more than one option. So it may be that they identify with more than one identity. Now, Understanding Society is conducted using different modes. So although the majority are carried out with face-to-face interviews, there are a few that are conducted over the telephone. So if there's any different instructions for telephone interviews, you'll find them underneath the response options. Now, the thing that I really want to draw your attention to is this line right down the very bottom, which says universe. Now, this is a really important piece of information because this is what tells you who gets asked that particular question. Now, the code that you'll see at the start of the sentence probably won't make very much sense unless you're familiar with working on the survey, but they always provide some text afterwards which explains what that routing code means. So here we can see that only new entrants who have never been interviewed were asked this particular question. Now, here's another example. Now, we can see here that this is called avoidance, and it asks people as part of a module on harassment whether they've ever avoided particular places such as school, work or places of entertainment whilst they were in the UK. Now again, we can see that they can select more than one option, and if we go right down to the bottom to have a look at the universe statement, we can see that this question was only asked of respondents who were in the ethnic minority boost, or the general population comparison sample, or the low density ethnic minority area sample. And that set of questions on harassment was actually asked as part of the 5 minutes of extra questions that Alita mentioned earlier. Now, because this was only asked of a relatively small number of respondents, you can expect in the data to see a fairly high proportion of missing or inapplicable values in the data. So this is just one thing to bear in mind if when you're working with the data you find that you have a high proportion of missing values. It's worth just referring to the questionnaire and having a look to see who was asked, because quite often that's the explanation for that high number of missing values. As I mentioned, and as you can see from the list, there are a huge range of other documents. So these include, for example, the consent forms that we used for linking to various administrative data such as education data or health data. There's also project instructions which is given to the interviewers during their training, and there are a whole wealth of other resources which you can access through the Understanding Society website. So I'm going to hand back over to Alita now, who's going to demonstrate how to find those.
So here is the Understanding Society website, and if you click on the Data and Documentation tab, which is the blue colored one, you will be taken to this page. Now this is where you will see 3 main blocks, but please refer to the one which says Main Survey. Now Deborah has already talked about the user guide, questionnaires, technical reports and fieldwork documents such as consent forms and address record forms. You can access them from this page as well by clicking on these links that you can see. But this page has access to another useful document, the long-term content plan, which you can only access from here. So we'll look at it briefly. Now this document shows you which modules will be repeated in the future waves, which new modules will be introduced. So right now it shows up to wave 10, and over time we'll add more waves to it. Now see the little X's, and they show you which ones, the frequency of the questions. Now some modules are entirely part of the extra 5-minute questions, and those you can see in that tab which says Ethnicity Strand Extra 5-minute modules. But then there are some questions which are part of the extra 5 minutes module only in some waves, and then those you will see in the other sections, but here you will have 5M mentioned. So going back to the earlier page, if you want to see the user guide, you click here and then you're taken to this page. Now here you will see many different user guides, but since you're interested in ethnicity, look at the ethnicity user guide. And for further details on the general aspects of the survey, you can look at the main user guide. Now, another feature of this page is that you can switch between tabs to access different types of documents, and you don't really have to go back to the earlier page that we saw. So we'll click on the Data Documentation tab. Now here you can explore the data by searching for variables, data files, questions, or question modules. Now under all tabs, under all waves, that tab, you can see all the data files across all waves. On the left side is the stem name of the data file, and on the right, the numbers show the waves in which these files are available. So some are basic files which will be available in all waves. And you can click on those numbers to go to the wave-specific file. Alternatively, you can click on the wave-specific tab. And here you will see a list of files that were available for that wave. Now let's see what variables were available for wave 1. These are, okay, just to go over, so these are all the wave 1 files. And these are all the variables in one particular file, which is a_interest. Now you can scroll down the page and look through all the variables, but there's an easier way. On the top right hand corner you can see a variable named search, and here you can search on the variable. So let's try searching on the variable ethnic group. If you do that, these are the search results. Now let's take the variable a_raceL and see what information we can get. If you click on that, you will be taken to this page with lots of information about the variables, and so we'll go through one by one. So this tells you the variable name and label as it appears in the data file, and here as it appears in the questionnaire. Next, this is the question wording, and this is the name of the data file in which this variable appears. Now you can also see how many cases were missing and why they were missing. For example, those who completed the proxy questionnaire were not asked this question, and so they have a code of -7. And you can see there are 3,262 people who gave a proxy interview and so were not asked this question. You can also see the frequency distribution of the valid responses here. Now, right at the bottom left corner of the screen, you can see which waves this question is asked in. Now, in this case, please note that wave 2 onwards, this question was only asked of new entrants in the survey, like when a new partner joins the household. So even though it looks like a repeated question, it's not. But there are many other questions which are genuinely repeated questions. And if you click on this variable name here, you will be taken to another page. And here on the top right-hand corner, you will see something which says See in Questionnaire. And this is quite nice because if you click on this bit, you will be taken to that point in the questionnaire where this question was asked. So you will go directly into that bit instead of having to search through the questionnaire itself. Now, before you start using the data, first take a look at the user guides, which we have already discussed, and then you can think of attending our training workshops. We have in two different formats. You have the online Moodle courses, which you can sign up anytime. And then 2 to 3 times a year, we also provide hands-on lab-based training workshops here at Essex. And here is a link. You can click on that to find out more. And all the courses are free. You can also get to the training pages by clicking on this link in the earlier data documentation page. And you can find more help by clicking on this link, which says Help and Support. Now, if you click on this, it will take you to the Data User Forum. And if you click on that, you can go into this page where you can look through some of these current and closed issues. You can look through that and you can see if they answer the questions you're asking, because other people may have asked the same questions. If they don't, then you can register, which is here, and it's a very quick registration process, and then you will be able to post your queries and we or other people will answer the questions. I think that's it from me. And back to Deborah.
Thank you very much, Alita. Okay, so that's it. Okay, so there's one here for Alita, I think. Does the nurse visit include the ethnic boost?
No, so that was not included in that subsample, but it might in the future if you ask these questions again.
So just to recap, got a question about what waves are available. So wave 5 has just been released last week. So there are now 5 waves. Now, when you download the data, you will get all the data files for all 5 waves automatically. So it's just a one-stop process to get all of that data. We've got a user here, Anna, who's interested in the category white other. So are there any established codes or groups which were identified within any of the surveys you mentioned?
So I'm guessing you want to know whether you can split the white other group into different groups within that. So right now this question is a census group question, so it is the general white other question. But what you can do is you can get information about their country of birth or their parents' country of birth, and so you can build that into it, and you can figure out which groups, but only from that perspective, from a country of birth perspective.
Got someone who's already been on a course to access the longitudinal study of young people in England, now looking to have a look at the Understanding Society data. You don't mention specifically whether it's the secure access version of the longitudinal study of young people in England. Is there a problem with asking for self-identification on the doorstep?
So there's not really a problem in asking for self-identification, but the way the screening question was asked at the doorstep, what was done is whoever answered the door was asked whether they or someone in the household was from any one of the ethnic minority groups on a list. So we provided them with a list of groups, which you can imagine what they are, and you can actually also check in the ethnicity user guide as to exact what the question was. So we asked whether they or so anybody in the household came from, or their parents or grandparents came from any one of those ethnic groups. The idea was we wanted a very broad definition of ethnic minority. So even if someone self-identified as, say, white other or white British, but their parents or grandparents were from one of the ethnic minority groups, then they would be selected and become part of the ethnic minority group sample. This way you can study differences across generations. If you look at the proportion of people who belonged to their local area across regions by ethnicity,
do you need different weights?
Do you need different weights for different ethnic? No, sorry, no. So when you go to the user guide and the weight section, it'll tell you the different weights that you can use for different types of analysis. But the way the way it is divided up is it depends on which sample you're using. So whether you're just using the general population sample and ethnic minority group sample, or you're using these two plus the BHPS sample. Now, whether you're doing a household level analysis or an individual level analysis, are you including the proxy respondents or not? So these are the broader parameters which you need to define, and on that basis you will use a particular weight. But once you know which weight to use, that weight will apply to any subsample of that specific analytical sample that you're using. So it doesn't matter if you're once you've decided which weight and for that particular sample, then you want to just use men or just women or a particular ethnic group, it'll be the same weight. Are the EMB or GPS also in wave C? Yes, they are. These are the main samples, and because this is a longitudinal survey, which means we are going to follow the same people. So these samples that you mentioned, EMB and GPS, you will have them in every wave. Is there any data on ethnic density? If I'm interested in knowing the distribution of immigrants in that specific occupation, for instance, teachers or doctors, how could I know the real number of immigrants to check, compare with the census figures and so on? From my understanding, using the weights variable will give me the population estimates, which will be not what I'm looking for, but know the immigrant population. Okay, so one thing is whenever you want estimates, so not just doing multivariate analysis, but you want estimates of very small areas, the best thing to do is always go to the census data because that has the biggest coverage, and so you can use that. But for specific types of data which is based on the survey questions, you could use the Understanding Society data with the weights applied. But again, as I said, because it has a wide coverage, and so it's very good to do regional level analysis, that's true, but to produce estimates of small areas, this is perhaps not the best resource. For that, census would be the best if you just want proportion of immigrants in a very small area. And as I said, if you want to, what generally researchers do when they want to see how ethnic density affects various outcomes is you then link the Understanding Society data to the census data, and for that you have all the locator variables, and the access was already discussed by Deborah, and then you will be able to combine this information. So yeah, if you want to know the number of immigrants in specific occupations, yes, so that information is there in the data. So you have the variable which says whether you're born in the UK or not, which you can use to identify immigrants. And then you have questions on occupational coding. So you can use these two informations to figure out what proportion of teachers and doctors, say, are immigrants. Or what proportion of immigrants are teachers and doctors, whichever way you want to look at it. Okay, is there data on social class background of respondents? Yes, there is. So again, so that is based on jobs. So you have the coding, coded variable. Again, I think mostly right now it's occupational coding. So you have to look through that. And yes, the data is, as I said, the data is representative. The only thing to keep in mind is that some ethnic groups are overrepresented in the data. So which is sometimes not an issue if you're doing a multivariate analysis where you have accounted for the different ethnic groups. But if you're going to just provide an overall UK-wide estimate, then you need to use weights to make sure you don't overrepresent certain groups. And for non-response, you always have to use the weights. And there are separate sets of weights, but we generally recommend that you use the combined weights. Yes, that's a very important point. So one of the questions is whether the individual respondent file contains ethnic minority boost sample. Now this is true of all the files. All the files are provided, which includes data from all the samples. So unless you use the flag variable, which tells you whether this is from the ethnic minority boost sample or the general population sample, you will actually not be able to identify. So there are no separate files for ethnic minority sample or GPS sample. All the data from all the samples are in each of these files. Okay, and then there's a variable called HHORIG, which tells you what the sample is. So for each individual or each household, you'll know whether they're from the GPS or the ethnic minority boost sample or the BHPS.
So if you download the INDRES files, which contain the bulk of the data from the adult questionnaires, all of the different sample groups will be included. So ethnic minority boost, the general population sample, and the comparison ones. So they're all in the files together. So that's it for this afternoon. Just like to thank you all again for joining us. Hope that was useful. Don't forget, if you've got any questions after today, do get in touch with us through either the Understanding Society forum or from the UK Data Service.